Welcome to the Florida Divorce Podcast, your source for the information you need to successfully get through your divorce and into the next exciting chapter of life. Now, here's your host, Attorney Scott Kalish.
Hey everyone, my name is Scott Kalish and I am a divorce and family lawyer here in South Florida. Today, I want to get back to podcasting. It's been a while since I was able to sit down and actually record an episode of the podcast. Last year, 2024 was super busy for me, especially the last half of the year. So I really didn't have an opportunity to sit down and regularly record episodes. So this year, obviously, it's a new year, 2025. We're in January, and at least I'm in December of 2024 when I'm recording this, but you're likely listening to this in January. And I want to hit the reset button. I want to regularly record episodes so that I can provide you guys with as much value and content as I can. So with that, I want to get into our first episode of the new year of 2025. And this one is going to be a special episode, meaning this is going to be a really practical episode. This topic is something that is brought up in virtually every, new client call that I have. People want to know about mediation. They hear about it when they first start to do research about divorce. And it's, enticing, right? Because when you read about mediation online and you talk to lawyers online, it just seems like a shortcut, right? To ending your case, and almost like a path of least resistance to get the case done. There's a lot of stuff online about it and how it could cut down on time. It could cut down on, fees, attorney's fees, and it's very enticing. Now, I want to go through various aspects of mediation, things that I get asked commonly. So I think you guys are going to I think you're going to find this episode to be really valuable. And it's something actually, people have asked for. People that have listened to the podcast, they tell me, hey, we've listened to a couple episodes on the podcast about mediation, and you really didn't explain what it is and what you're supposed to do and what to expect there. So I hope to fill that gap with this episode and provide you guys with as much value as I can here. So let me get right into it, right? What is mediation? So mediation, if you haven't done any research about mediation, let me tell you basically, from a very high level view, what mediation actually is. So mediation is a voluntary, informal negotiation session, right? So let's break that down, right? So it's voluntary, right? Because, people think about mediation and they hear, mediation, it sounds official. It sounds like some sort of court proceeding. Actually, I can't be further from that, right? It can't be further from like an actual formal court proceeding, because it's not a court proceeding. It's, to kind of put it in layman's terms, mediation is a time where you get together with everyone involved, not the judge, but all the lawyers, if there are lawyers involved, the parties, right? Husband and wife usually, or mom and dad if it's a paternity case, or just spouses, right? If it's a same-sex case. And they hire a mediator who's a third-party neutral person who's typically 9 times out of 10 another family law attorney, which there are some non-attorney mediators out there that are great, but there's a mediator who's a neutral. And it's a time where you can voluntarily resolve your case amicably, right? Or resolve parts of the case amicably. It's voluntary because you don't have to settle that day. You can literally go and hear what the other side has to say and say, okay, I'll think about it, and then come back later. So it's not something where if you attend, you're automatically going to end your case that day. Both sides have the option to settle, and no one can force you to settle. Your attorney can't force you to settle. The mediator can't force you to settle. No one can force you to settle. So that's why I say it's, a voluntary process. And I'm going to go through the logistics and like what to expect shortly. But before I get there, when does mediation occur, right? So this is something that comes up pretty frequently. People that inquire and first contact me about divorce, they want to know, hey, can we just attend mediation, before filing? And my answer is sometimes, right? Depends on your case. I would only recommend attending mediation before you actually even file your case and get it started, right? Serve your spouse, that whole thing. If you have a few things, right? Number one, is your spouse like relatively cooperative, and are you kind of close to a deal? Or do you think it's pretty likely that you're going to come to a deal pretty easily, right? Is your case very straightforward, right? Is it complex? If it's not complex, you might be a candidate for it. Another aspect of doing your mediation before you even file is there 100% complete transparency, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, do you know everything going on from a financial point of view? If you don't, then I definitely don't recommend mediation before you file. That's because when you file the case, that triggers, certain laws that we have on our books, right? Like, the mandatory disclosure law and the, or rule rather, and the discovery rules, right? Where people are required by law to provide certain financial information about their life, pay stubs, retirement account statements, bank statements, a whole list of things. So you don't want to go to mediation before you file if you think that your spouse is hiding things, because you want 100% transparency. The only way to settle a case properly is when you know all of the facts and you know what your spouse has, so you know what you're negotiating. Because if you don't know the numbers, then you really can't negotiate intelligently. So that's really important. But if you have all of that and you're 100% certain and you're confident that you have all of the financials and you think that your spouse is going to be cooperative and you guys are kind of close to a resolution anyways, right? Close to an agreement anyways, then sometimes it makes sense to file the case or attend mediation before you file. Now, I can tell you that that's usually the outlier. Most cases that I have, people come to me and they're like an average person. They're at the stage of they know they want a divorce, but there are issues and their spouse is not their best friend anymore. And therefore, they don't think they're going to be very cooperative, at least in the beginning. And sometimes people get divorced. I would say a lot of times they start getting secretive about their finances. So that's not usually the person that I find ready to get divorced, right? It's tough. So I would say most cases don't actually fit the criteria to attend mediation before filing. So that's why we don't do it. So mediation usually happens after filing and after we've done the discovery and mandatory disclosure phase, right? After we collect all the financials, then mediation is attended. And that's when we give our good faith effort to actually settle the case, rather than going before the judge and going for a trial. How many times do parties mediate? And that really is dependent upon the judge. I can tell you that everywhere that I've practiced, mediation happens at least once, right? Usually before trial, before a judge will give you a trial date. Typically, they want you to go to mediation. Some judges, though, are huge fans of mediation and they want you to go as many times as you can. So I've been in cases, right, 2 times, 3 times. I have a case right now. I think it's the record where the judge is making us go back for a 4th mediation in 2 years. So that's a little bit of an outlier. Usually cases don't last 2 years, but in this particular case, it's way more contested than I think your average case is, and the judge wants a 4th mediation. So the judge is the, I was going to say dictator, kind of. I mean, they make the rules in a way, and they have the discretion to order us back to mediation. So you may be sitting there thinking, oh my God, I cannot fathom going to mediation, more than 2 times, 3 times, oh my God, 4 times, right? I've even heard of people going, 5 times to mediation. So the good news is that it's a totally, voluntary process. So you can literally go to mediation, spend 30 minutes there and decide, you know what, I don't want to waste the time. I don't want to waste the money. And I'm here. I told the mediator what my terms are. The person didn't accept, so I'm leaving. You can do that. And there's no harm, no foul there. Who will the mediator be, right? So that's a question that I get every now and then. People want to know, well, how am I going to select a mediator? And usually clients don't actually select the mediator. I would say 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 times, it's a recommendation from us, the lawyers, because we're the ones that do this for a living, right? Typically people, this is their first, second divorce maybe, so they're not really in tune with, who's the best mediator for that particular case, for that particular time. The lawyers, though, we know the best mediators for any particular case, right? Or we can make a recommendation who we think the best mediator would be. Typically, I can just speak for myself. When I have a case, I kind of get to know the parties, or my client, and so I guess somewhat the other party too. And I know the facts. I know if it's a very financial numbers based case, I'm going to want a mediator that's very strong with the numbers. If it's like a very, very delicate, sensitive child issue, then I'm going to want a mediator that's a little bit more patient and a mediator that's maybe less aggressive, depending upon which side I'm on, right? If it's a child issue that I think, the other side, right? If it's, mom or dad, having a very unrealistic position on a child issue, I might want a very aggressive mediator to come in and go in there and tell the other party, right? The other spouse, that their position's absolutely ridiculous, right? And take more of an aggressive approach. And sometimes I would want the mediator to go in and tell the other party, right, exactly what a judge is going to do or what a judge is likely going to do, right? So I might want a more aggressive mediator. So it just depends on the case, right? And that's the advantage of having a lawyer and knowing the issues, knowing the parties, knowing the mediators to pick the right one. Because the last thing you really want, right? I mean, you don't want to pick the wrong mediator and then waste a bunch of time, waste a bunch of money, and then ultimately your case is probably not going to settle, right? If you have the wrong mediator. So I think it's important. Every once in a while, though, clients want to be involved in the mediator selection process. Sometimes I would say in a small number of cases, I have situations where a party will come to me with a mediator that they want to use. And they're like, hey, I really heard good things about this XYZ mediator. I think we should use them. And, I'm happy to consider it, happy to tell the client if I think they would be good or if I've heard of them or if I have another recommendation. But sometimes client will come up with a mediator name, but in most cases, I would say 99 out of 100 times, the lawyer comes up with the mediator and then gives the recommendation. Sometimes clients, like I said before, want to be involved in the selection process, right? And will review and do their own independent research based on the names that I give, and then we'll select one or two that they want to propose to the other side. Every now and then I send over a list of mediators and they're rejected by the other side for one reason or the other. And then the other side proposes a list of mediators, and then we select one from their list. Sometimes, though, every once in a while, I would say maybe like 1% of the time, the lawyers can't agree or the parties can't agree on a particular mediator, and a judge has to appoint the mediator. I can tell you that in 9 years of being a lawyer, I don't think I ever had to go before a judge and have the judge select a mediator. I could be wrong, though. Maybe there was one or two times, right, in that period of time that's happened. But typically, the lawyers are able to reach an agreement on which mediator to utilize. So that's how we pick the mediator or how we come to an agreement or how we come to who the mediator is going to be. Let me give you just an idea of the logistics / like what to expect at mediation, right? So where is the mediation held? Typically, mediation, at least after COVID, it's on Zoom. In 25% of the cases, I would say it's being held in person. The vast majority, though, now is on Zoom, and it's just so convenient just to log on, right? Because we can have court hearings in the morning and then cut the travel time out and just, pop on Zoom so that we can maximize, our time on the other cases and just on the practice itself. So most times it's on Zoom, and I found that mediation can be pretty effective on Zoom. I think everyone typically, wants the case done and no one wants to waste time. So, and some judges, at least in South Florida, that believe that in-person mediation is more effective. And, I don't know. I don't really know where I fall on that. I think it's case specific. Some people just have harder time ending mediation if it's being held in person, or maybe a harder time like wasting time if it's being held in person. Typically, if it's virtual, it's a little easier to take less serious, right? If everyone's on Zoom, it's a little easier to walk away. If it's in person, people have to drive there, people have to drive back home. So people take it, I think, a tiny bit more serious than Zoom, but I do think that the benefits of Zoom outweigh that. I think I'll take that official position. But listen, given that, I do like in-person mediations. It's just hard to coordinate at times, given everyone's very busy schedule. Usually mediators are also practicing lawyers, right? They also have their own cases. So getting everybody, to have a full day with nothing else on their calendar sometimes is tough. So that's why I think virtual mediation, Zoom mediations are very popular right now. But what happens at mediation, right? So what can you actually expect? So typically at mediation, everyone's in separate rooms. And what I mean by that is each side is in a separate room, right? So the husband and the wife will be in separate rooms with their own lawyers, and the mediator will go back and forth. And on Zoom, there's private meeting rooms, and the mediator, is able to go between rooms, go in your room and then speak to you, understand, what your position is, what view of the world, you have, what view of the world your lawyer has. And then they go into your spouse's room and they find the exact same thing out. They communicate offers back and forth. And ultimately, the case is settled using that technique. Now, every once in a while, though, everyone will get in the same room. Usually that's towards the end of mediation. If, let's say, we have a deal and we're working through some language, sometimes only the lawyers go in the same room with the mediator. If you have a forensic accountant, the forensic accountants might be in the same room, speaking to each other, comparing notes. Sometimes the accountants, the lawyers, and the mediator get together to discuss things. That's called a professionals meeting. But most of the time it's in separate rooms and the mediator goes back and forth. what are the advantages of having a lawyer versus not having a lawyer, right? So this is something that I get early on when people are first consulting and meeting me. They do research, they come across, mediation, like I said before, and they come across the situation where they just attend mediation alone, right? They go to mediation with their spouse and they just have the mediator try and settle the case. I would say the number one disadvantage to that, and listen, I'm all for shortening the length of time a case takes, right? And also for decreasing the amount of money that's ultimately spent on the entire case, right? And saving money, making it efficient, making it very cost effective. However, you can't sacrifice legal advice for an overall cheaper case, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, the number one disadvantage to attending mediation without a lawyer is that you're not going to get legal advice and you're not going to get a recommendation, right? So the biggest piece of what makes mediation effective is that the mediator is by law a neutral. They're prohibited by law from giving legal advice. So you're not going to find yourself in mediation hearing from the mediator, hey, you have X, Y, and Z. You should do X, Y, and Z because you have, this amount of money and the judge is going to do X, Y, and Z, right? That doesn't happen, or that shouldn't happen, right? That can't happen by law. The mediator is not or cannot be your lawyer. They have to be a neutral. So they can't recommend what you should do. They can't recommend what your spouse should do. So that's the advantage to having a lawyer, is that the lawyer knows the law. The lawyer will learn about the facts of your case. The lawyer will tell you what position is best for you and make a recommendation and tell you what to offer, what you should accept, if you should make a counter offer. They're basically your legal expert, and they analyze the facts, your facts, and will tell you what they think a judge should do, and they'll tell you what a good deal is. They'll look into what your spouse is, what position they're taking, and they'll make a recommendation. A mediator can't do that. So unless you're a divorce lawyer, right, and you're an expert on the law and you're an expert in the facts, or analyzing the facts rather, then you should attend mediation by yourself. But if you're not a divorce lawyer, like I would say 99.9% of the population is not, then I really wouldn't recommend going to mediation without an attorney. Now, some people, that may be listening, they might not have the resources. They might not have the funds to pay for mediation and also to pay for a lawyer. And I totally get that. And if you have to attend mediation out of necessity, right, without a lawyer, that's totally fine. I'm not really speaking to you when I'm saying this, but if you can't afford it and you're just choosing not to because you want to save money, that's kind of a bad decision, right? I think it's a poor decision to make, especially if you need the guidance, if you don't know what the law is, or if you're unsure how a judge is going to do something, right? So I have people that they're shocked that a judge can require another party to divide like their pension, right? So imagine if your spouse was a police officer and you don't know if you're entitled to the pension or not, right? So you go to mediation without a lawyer and you're in there thinking, oh, my spouse says he doesn't want to give me part of his pension. And if you just agree and you don't have a lawyer to say, oh, no, you're entitled to half of the pension, let's say, you're going to make a horrible deal. You're going to make a horrible, and the mediator can't tell you what to agree to and what not to agree to. So they're by law neutral. So they can't get involved in, settlement negotiations. They can help facilitate settlement negotiations. They can communicate offers, but they can't tell you if it's a good offer, and they can't recommend that you take it. So just be careful, right? So if you could afford it, I definitely say get a lawyer, understand the facts. Every once in a while I get people saying, oh, well, my spouse is going to get really angry and really upset if I bring a lawyer to mediation. They told me that we're going to go to mediation without lawyers. Well, if you're divorcing your spouse, why would you listen to them? I get it. You want things to be amicable, but you got to just rip the Band-Aid off. Let them be upset. Let them be mad, and just bring a lawyer. Or you can go appease them and then know you're not going to settle, but just say, you know what? It didn't work out. I really need someone to explain to me what the law is so I can make a reasonable, rational decision, right? So you can't do that when you don't know the law. So that's really important. Another part of mediation I want to share with you before I end the episode is confidentiality, right? The judge will not know what the offers were at mediation in general, right? There are a few exceptions that apply, but in general, in most cases, we have confidentiality rules, right? So you can't disclose what the other party, what your spouse offered at mediation. So like, let's say if a good settlement would entail you accepting, let's say, $500,000 to basically get the divorce done, right? Let's just say to divide up all the property, you walk away with $500,000. If you go to mediation, you say, you know what, I'm going to accept $400,000 for whatever reason, because you want the case done or whatever. And you're concerned, well, if I agree to accept 400, or if I offer 400 and I really should be getting 500, will the judge later learn that, well, at mediation I was entitled to, or I was willing to accept 4? No, they're never going to know that. So you can go to mediation and offer something that, is way under what you'd be legally entitled for, and the judge is not going to know that. So that's really important for you to keep in mind. It's confidential. Typically, mediation, you're not able to bring like a new boyfriend, new girlfriend. You're not able to bring like mom or dad, your parents. So typically mediations, it just involves the parties, husband, wife, mother, father, their lawyers, and then the third party mediator. Every once in a while, get a case where husband or wife wants to have mom or dad sit in. We have to get special permission from the mediator and special permission from the other side to do that. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's a good idea because we have all of the decision makers in the room, and it can encourage or facilitate settlement. But most times it's just the parties. So with that, this was a lengthier episode, first one back at 2025. So wanted to make sure that you guys got a pretty comprehensive episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any other questions about mediation, don't hesitate to give us a call. Let's set up some time to speak if I'm in your area and if we're a good fit to represent you, and if you think you'd like to move forward. If you like the podcast, though, wherever you're listening, please give it a 5-star review. If I see that we're getting more 5-star reviews, I'll definitely feel more compelled to record more episodes. So that'd be great. Let me tell you how to reach us. I would say the best way to reach us is just give us a call, right? You can call us at our main number at 561-208-1859. Again, 561-208-1859. I'll also throw out my email. I've given my email in previous episodes. It's Scott, SCOTT, at kjlawfla.com. Again, Scott at kjlawfla.com. Again, thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and have a great rest of your day, and Happy New Year. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Florida Divorce Podcast. To learn the 10 secrets behind every successful divorce, visit floridadivorcepodcast.com. If you'd like Scott's help in your divorce case, go to kjlawfla.com.